Hello again, my friends. It is I, Savant 2.0, back with another episode of analysis and review. At last, Alexander Venter has released Void DLC, or Void downloadable content, which is pretty much the extension to Void, full of demo versions of songs from Void, VIPs of songs from Void, and several new tracks. The 23-track album was just released yesterday as of filming this video, and I must say, I had not expected Alexander's album to drop a day early, or at least in the afternoon. The Insert Coin documentary released on Bandcamp around 7 p.m. Pacific time the day before it was supposed to release. And for the Void DLC, it seems to have been released even a few hours earlier. But who am I to complain? I clicked that download link faster than fucking Sonic could ever do.
Fuck you, Savant 2.0.
I wanted to wait a few more hours later, because I was trying to get into the mood with some games. But alas, after being pummeled to death by a rock and rust, getting bored of Roblox quickly, and getting a bit tired of wearing Zorro's virtual reality helmet, I gave up, and listened to it without nearly any other distractions, and sure it was late at night, but I do not regret listening to this masterpiece. Before going on to review the album, I must say that some teasers from Alexander's Twitter and Instagram posts did not make it into the album. Even I did not expect certain teasers to be archived like that or know when they will be finished or released. However, that has nothing to do with the performance of Savant's musical work here. Since this is a DLC to Void, I will have to set lower expectations for demos and VIPs, solely because of the intent of this release, which it seems he wants to showcase what the original Void songs would have sounded like. I do expect a bit more from VIPs though, considering the mixing and mastering should have been done in the original versions. By the way, apologies about the Void review. I wanted to try experiment with my voice, but it wound up a bit too unclear it seems. Anyways, let's get to it. This track is definitely for the most part the demo version of Zealot, before the tempo switch, back in July 2019. However, it seems to be a more progressed version, and I question whether it's even right to call it a remix considering it is technically an earlier demo version. Then again, it may be called like that to not confuse it with the demo of the glitch hop version of Zealot. Anyways, a cute little faux sound enters our ears in the intro. I sort of wish there were more of that. However, we are greeted with a xylophone with a nice timbre going over an orchestral root note with several, and you will also hear some atmospheric sweeps that sound like ocean waves. And it really contributes to what would be like a beach setting, which overall the track gives off, because of the main lead throughout the song. The sharp saw stabs in the beginning of each bar also sound so nice to hear. The build-ups, which there are two by the way, are filled with trap snares, embodying the sub, and the melody sounding lighter than the drop. The trance pad fading in too. These parts bring me cheerful joy for what's to come. The drops though, I hate to say, comes off a bit repetitive, sort of the problem Monolith has. It's subtle though, and the sub sometimes does not side A chain too well with the drums, it's a bit weak. But the lead singing the melody, the trance saws filling the stereo field, the sub filling in nicely in the low end, they really scream happy melodic yet triumphant energy. Makes me feel like I want to kick a soccer ball in Malibu and trip on my face again because my cousins leave me on the bench whenever I try to play on the field. The interlude part though, is something that breaks the repetition. I wish it was more prominent in the song arrangement. Could have used a bit of bass pat stabs here and there, but overall, the high-pitched voice samples, xylophone tapping into the mix, the saw and lead having a fit with each other, one of the highlights of Zealot remix. The chiptune fills that give a small beat section to the melody, and growl fills give the listeners the feels of Savant complextro and dubstep. The outro part with the whistling lead could have been copied to a build-up to the interlude, not complaining though as it's a decent arrangement. Some would say there could be a halftime drop, but I say it's a nice EDM song. Sort of a melodic house BPM but a bit sped up song nearly kids can get down to in a birthday party. The melody gets weary after a while though, but still a catchy song. This song is really something to listen to while you've woken up and is about to wake and bake, motherfucker. It is weird however that, Jahari Medina was not credited this time, even though the flute melody has been known to be Medina's idea. However, we begin hearing a more orchestral variation, and the flute seems less high-cut, as if it's almost as raw before post-processing. Pretty much up until 35 seconds in the sound arrangement, and mixing does not sound too different. The timbre-sounding instrument in the background is there to accompany the emptiness of the melodic intro. The drums throughout the song, though, are more chilled out too, and there is actually real energetic drop. In fact, this song could have easily been the intro to Void DLC instead of the Zealot remix, maybe both versions swapped. I do find it sad that the melodic intro before the chill drop has more bass than the drop. I know this is a demo, but during this part it could have been tampered with, have another pad, maybe an ARP in the background, but no real worry here. Throughout the piece, the piano instruments do sound more dominant, that sort of take away the subtle emptiness. The intro sounds pretty much the same with the choir sample, nothing too substantially different, but oh shit, now there is a lead melody with a kazoo sound that is also sort of sounding like a quarter pulse chiptune sound that also seems to be chopped out with some grains being higher and lower in pitch, giving a vibrato feel to it. And I already love how this melody sounds with this saloon-inspired piano instrument and sound. It's almost like it fills what the melodic sections of IDGAF needed, so I applaud you, Alexander McVeter, for this humble job you did here. Still though, the drops pretty much sound the same, like there could have been some pattern switch-ups with the rhythmy bass patch, some sort of phasing or harmonic experimentation. Still though, there is one new drop near the 2-minute and 45-second mark, with a more industrial sound in the low end. The middle drop also unfortunately sounds a little too bloated in bass compared to the original version of the song. However, there is this part 1 like with the guitar sound layered with the saloon piano. This happens in the melody before the final build-up. Nice touch there. But I do have to say this song is a bit underwhelming because of no changes in the song except the inclusion of a few melodies with the lead, and the last drop before the song ends, which replaced one of the bass patches in the second to last drop of the original song with a more guitar-amped sound, which is one of the things I like in this song. In terms of being a variation in production, it doesn't do much. The drop design and IDGAF in general though is still kick-ass. First teased back in September 2019, this song has proven to have a catchy riff, and I was immediately hooked after listening to the Instagram teaser. The intro has these claps and snares jumping to the beat with the guitar bass in the lower end of the mix, and Supersaw fills fading in, and then these instrumental *yalls kicking in make me prepare for the gruesome glitch hop bassness I am about to endure. The build-ups throughout the song pretty much have percussion take over the space progression rather than those pitching up sweepins. The first drop sounds already so good. The bass growl and a low-end guitar sound taking more of the stereo field fills up the room nicely. We pretty hear this riff or melody, as you may call it, throughout the song in different creative variations, and I just love it. The second drop pretty much replaces the growl with the vocal sample, the B section of that drop having a distorted Supersaw take the riff. Third and middle drop has this sample, then take it with growl fills. Another drop is the chiptune lead quietly humming the riff too. We also have these separate guitar riffs in the second and so on build-ups, and the mid-section that has this cry for love influence that merges with the interlude, probably one of my favorite sections of the album. Even this voice with the reverb serves as a variation of fills throughout the song. Toward the end, the first drop does sort of repeat itself, and I can't complain. There's this one guy who says there could have been more variation. I disagree, this is already a fucking bop. I am kind of not liking the fade out of the drums, could have ended with a guitar stab. Either way, this glitch hop banger has its own retro sounds compared to the other songs from Void DLC. Not a whole lot of melody in Immortal, but the bass design here is already enough. The song starts pretty much with the same pattern and sounds as in the original version, up until the lead kicks in is when it changes, because it sounds different, more spooky sounding, and is, I guess you could say, a creative approach to a variation in production. Later in the introductory build-up, it does a bit quieter but not so bothersome. The drums before the drop seem to be more slamming, a loud snare with cymbal attached to it, with the drum roll makes a really energetic build-up. The first drop here does have some different drums, but the sub bass in this particular segment feels off. It seems to have gotten weaker in comparison to the original first drop. The bass patches after that are also not side-chained, which to me is a bit underperforming. However, the middle drop impresses me. Some distorted flute sounds having a swing pattern. I cannot get enough of it. I fiend for it to have been longer. But then we get to another groovy section with the heavy bass fills here and there. It sounds heavily crafted to sound in a club ambience, and for that I give Alex a thumbs up for that. The second switch up of that drop then carries on to have a more industrial, mimicking the 3/4 riff. Seriously, this bass patch reverb in this set fills the space a bit, so I have to say the second half of the track was more fitting than the first drop, but this VIP was a success in making my head nod to the beat. Not as club heavy as a whole when it comes to comparing the original and this one, but still a great effort in sort of remixing Weeper. First teased in June 2019 as an Instagram teaser video, the demo version of this song had a different drop design, and a simpler one, not a lot of variation in terms of call and response bass patches. We never really heard how the intro or melody sounded in Imhot's demo version, but now we do, and there are actually two lead melodies. One that just plays once in the beginning of this demo, that sounds like a chiptune and horn combined together, which could have been existent somewhere later in the track. Then there's this main trance lead that sings a similar version of the main lead melody from the original song, which actually also appears in this demo. The build-up has little changes in terms of composition, but we hear a simpler pattern of this grimy bass patch. Throughout this song, the song arrangement really isn't that composed as professionally as in the original song, but rather this demo gives some interesting insight to the evil laboratory that Alex spends his time in crafting these gruesome bass noises we all love. A lot of different forms of patches of what Immortal is displayed that have never really been heard before. And still, the mixing is well done and the sound design is still phenomenal that makes me headbang to the beat. Some Murabass and industrial variations of the simple riffs as well as a few other riffs in here. We also get a more Owaus type of beat around the 4-minute mark, so it is a real good switch up. It really shows how even early in the stage of producing a song, he seems to get the fundamentals of variety down, at least for most cases that I've witnessed. There's also this really weird bar toward the 5-minute mark that has this broken telephone sound. One slight nuance here though is the first interlude, because the synth pad seems to be occasionally crushed by the kick and snare, perhaps side-chained too hard. In this case, it could have been fixed just to sound more club-friendly, and also to make a melodic section worth humming to. Don't want to have too much audio ducking in there. Overall, this song is not really a song, but being a demo, it is certainly a dive into Alexander Wiener's noggin of ideas. Sure, the trance lead is a bit silly and undeveloped compared to the bass design production, but I am impressed with this song in a way. I was surprised to hear a different melody and chords in the beginning of this song. The lead especially sounds like it could be part of an early 2010s Russ faring in the same style of Alex. Other than that, we again hear the monster low-octave growl and force/creak ambient samples, with the smacking snare and sneaky riser building up. We then get to a bass stoppy drop that has a simple riff with a sound kicking in once in a while, that sounds like an anvil. Ha 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 ha. To me, the drop already sounds like a really good pump out in the club. The B section then switches to a more complex throw, and my god, I love this sound that goes with the other basses. Alex does not disappoint. Also, I love that sounds like a funny yet satisfying sound to listen to. The first interlude pretty much repeats the Russ type of melody, and I realized that this melody could have a stronger chord pad, maybe a super saw. The lead could be something else louder and more sustaining, like a horn similar to the one from Blanco, Bailamos. Second drop takes on a slightly different complex throw pattern. The sounds in here also amazing. I can hear a can winding up in pitch and this bass stab is good too. Slightly too simple but nothing too hard to listen to. Later in the second interlude is crazy though. We get to hear another melodic section that has this flute and saw with a different riff, switching up the melodic elements a bit. The third drop is pretty much the same as the first, but the beat section here, what the fuck? I feel like I'm vibing to the club and fighting Bowyer from Super Mario RPG Legend of the 7 Stars at the same time. And that's... Bro, calm the fuck down. Overall, Monster VIP takes on a different melody, but carrying on the same bass design elements from the original song. We still hear new bass patches though, which insane, so I can even treat this song as a different song. Which, by the way, Alex, please make more Rustfaring tracks. I have actually reviewed this song before, as it was pre-released ahead of Void DLC. If you have not watched it, I'll leave it in the description. But I do admit that over the past 2 weeks, I have given more favoritism to Snake, so why not revisit this song and give some updates to how I feel about this song. The foreign country influence, which could like some Chinese instrumentation, shows off in the main melody with the acoustic guitar. With the instrument loop fading in with a synth pad, there's more emotion that can be emitted. With an atmospheric build-up, the drop kicks off to having a 3 to 4 time signature, same as the other drop. And I have said in the track review that I would have wanted a 4 to 4 drop, but that's no biggie of a pet peeve. The grimy basses in the drop really remind us listeners about the good old days of dubstep, and with these super saw and high-pitched triplet sounds at the end of nearly every bar of both drops, it gives a stronger form of variety. The interlude sort of contents its own melodic section before a lo-fi section, which by the way is a nice breakdown segment that tries to ease your nerves from the first drop's energy. The Chinese instrumental melody repeats similarly until a slight variation of the first drop starts, and then a full-time industrial beat is thrown in there to catch your attention. Overall, Snake also has these sounds that really define the title of the song. A slightly pitched down version of Monolith is already heard, and the high-pitched vocals are sort of more merged with normal pitch vocals. The tempo is also a bit slower. This demo also seems to be the shortest song on Void DLC. So no shit, it is demo length for sure. But that small detail should not let you underestimate Alexander's performance here. After a short vocal intro, the vocals that were in the intro beat of the original Monolith appear with sort of synthwave beat, or dark synth perhaps. Soon the well-known vocal loop dances along with the powerful snare. The kick could be boosted up in volume, however. The drop here is really well done with unique sounding saw instrument that has a 8th note groove, syncs well with the sub 2. And I really like the progression of vocal stacking. The drop ends with Alex's normal vocals and prominent sounding piano in the mix. Not much to say here, except it is still a grooving track in some elements, such as the dark synth 16th note instrument, could have been interpreted in the final remaster. The kazoo in the beginning and the squeaky toy sound, and the way sounds cute, the way that it dances around the stereo field though, it triggers my third-dimensional sound nightmares when I put on my headphones and played a video of something crawling around me. Bad song, 0 out of 10. Jokes aside, the intro has a melody that seems to progress more in strength as the bass and drums fade in. The saw stabs are then in solo mode until a sweeping occurs, and we get to what seems like a reggaeton drop, reggaeton. In all seriousness, I really dig the beat and the variation in the lead melody design, as well as a smaller voice in the background layered with the lead. The reggaeton drums get more of a helping hand as a more trancey lead takes place. I feel like this could be mixed with some popular reggaeton a cappella such as Despacio. The interlude pretty much merges the beginning melody with the reggaeton drums. However, we then get a triplet rhythm switch up to the melody, which is what I call a gamer move. With the final drop repeating the first one, we hear a mixing of the triplet synth melody with the main vocal melody, with the flute lead in there sounding also nice. Overall, there's this sort of Afrobeat influence, not too long ago. Alex had teased 3 Afrobeat IDs, and I would not be surprised if he was inspired by this. And it really is a track to stand out in the Void DLC. Holy shit, an approximately 8.5-minute track, Alex. You really want us in on this demo shit, do you? The harpsichord intro is definitely longer, around 30 seconds of a harpsichord and organ duo, before dropping into a drop. Wow, no build up. Look at you, Mr. Badass, you must be fucking cool at the lunch table these days. Anyways, the sound design here does sound a bit more raw and unprocessed, starting with this low-end dominant Mura stab, and the B section brings back the 8th note screech from the original song. However, at the 1 minute mark, this... Bro, I told you to calm down. Listen to me when I speak to you, Alexander. This beat rush is again another example of this rawness of the demo. And there are also other industrial sounds that are insane, that did not make it onto the final version, and also unheard variations of existing bass patches in the final version too. The organ also show up more often, which I don't find it too amusing for it to casually appear in the middle of the drop. Don't get me wrong, it is a cool piece to listen to, but somewhere else it could have had its place in the interlude, fitting in with his own league, unlike... I'll make an exception out of it, being a demo and all, the sort of silent... also does not be executed in a pleasurable way. No, not that. It could have been tampered with. The interludes from here are apparently the same. The bass design is where it switches up constantly to some crazy sounds, such as this bubbly sound. This is pretty much the same case as the Hot demo we see into the noggin of McVinter. But oh shit, you gotta come back with some metallic section toward the end, do you? Some chants along with the guitar instrument, and some industrial pops come into the mix, transitioning into fucking fantastic too. With a catchy lead melody and guitar riffs layering with some alternative rock drums, it could have been made into a different song. One of the best segments of the album. Other than that, it goes back to the same bass patterns as before. There is sure to be a lot of headbanging in this song. Even being the demo version of Leviathan, the bass and other lower frequencies seems to have been mixed properly early in the stage of making the final version. The beginning is a real twist to the initial expectations many others like myself have. A chiptune melody with some snares that are hardly noticeable but are in the background, fading along with the horn that seems to have this Arabic influence, let alone the melodic piece. The badman vocals kick in as the melody fades out with the drum roll also kicking in, then transitioning into a drop that seems to make the vocals stand out. I am not really a fan of the first drop, especially due to the bass chops not being that prominent in the mix. However, the B section gets me hooked again with this robotic sounding B section. The rest of the drop pretty much carries out this same style, as well as the interlude sounding the same as the intro, but with bigger sounding drums, which by the way I think should be transferred over to the intro as well. The final drop goes on to pretty much mimic the same robotic sounds as the middle drop, and there could have been a variation in either a riff, or perhaps bass design change here. I do like that though, as well as that melodic section. It even gives the song a bit of minor key emotion. The song does seem to only have that one bass drop segment I don't like, but Bad Man Demo is not a bad song.
Oh brother, this guy stinks!
The song really contains that no funeral influence. Seriously, we endure the introduction of this VIP with a guitar riff and a distorted low-end bass storming in. Soon the guitar gets stronger during the first build-up, which then drops into a full-time metallic rock segment, and who could disagree with the massive drum roll before the drop? In fact, it is not even a drop, but rather a guitar solo. And that screams no funeral. Mr. Venter seems to be terribly homesick of his old band. Can I join in as a hype man? I'm sure I will make a great personnel to your management team.
No!
Can't forget those chiptune fills either. Alex still seems to want to combine one of his good old signature sounds with metallic guitar stabs and gothic choir samples. And of course it fits nice, no complaint here. Alex also seems to have the main guitar section from the original song and made into the majority of this VIP, and I cannot argue how fucking good it sounds. The B section of the first drop then turns into a slightly quieter art section of the guitar, transcending into a melodic section with a beautiful lead and choir, and really defines the best parts of the album. Homage to not only Cry for Love and Immortal, but also No Funeral. Later in the song, we hear some unique robotic sounds, slightly different from the demo. Even this asterisk robotic can't get enough of. The last drop most contains sounds from the demo, for some strange reason. And the VIP seems to be better than the demo, for obvious reasons. However, the metallic riffs seem to disappear around the second half of the song, so it's sort of a shame. But I will give it to Alex for implementing his metal experience into this song. Starting off with the choir bit, we hear a dark atmospheric choir layering with strongly built horns, and a melody that makes you fear it is to come later in this song. The track seems to be a follow-up to the previous song, carrying some metallic elements but not as much. I'm seriously worried about your homesickness, Alex. However, we then get to the main drop, that was actually teased in an Instagram teaser video from Alex around 2 months ago. And I just love the bass design here. The bass patch seems to be a distorted growl that goes down and then up in separate bars, with a couple of guitar chops sprinkled in there. The ARP in the background also helps fill up the atmosphere nicely. And then this is fucking insane. It does seem a bit too centered, but then this really complements the metallic nature of the song. The snare does seem a bit too lifeless, mostly due to it being a bit too high-pitched. Then this hits hard, and then this goddamn guitar and choir solo with double-time snares, which repeats itself twice more throughout the track. Are you okay, Alex? Anyways, this part is sort of rough on the ears in terms of dynamic comparison with other parts of the song. The high end does feel a bit too loud, and I find myself wanting to turn down the volume for a short time. But then this segment transforms into a guitar solo with sharp stabs at every beat, calming a bit down toward the full-time rhythm. After that, it briefly returns to a half-time beat and repeats this guitar arc melody, which I do say is a breather from madness we just endured. From there, it's pretty much a copy-paste with minor changes here and there, up until a unique guitar melody with lead comes up, but only for a bit, till it returns back to more guitar soloing. I would have preferred the lead to continue on to the end of the song. Also not a fan of the fade out. Just like Immortal, there could be alternative ending that is properly composed, like a guitar stab. Nonetheless, this track really fits well as a drum step song that resembles a bit of Tom Sello and Knife Party's collaboration, Battle of the Sirens, not in terms of sound design, but merging with different genres. Not to mention the obvious similarity with Overseer, almost as this could be an Overseer VIP, with 2 guitar chops from Angel of Death that mimic a certain part of Overseer. You get what I mean? Teased in the second Instagram video teaser of Void DLC, this song begins with some violin strings and an orchestral root note in the background as it seems to cry out a similar riff, which remains a consistent theme throughout Slimewar, Into the Void. Already, it gives me creepy vibes, as if someone is staring at me from the dark across the hallway past my room door. Fuck. This really razor-like bass patch kicks in with some more bass occasionally dropping in. It's a little too simple for me at the moment, until a more aggressive bass stab starts humming the melody. And I have to comment that the female vocals also bring the creepy atmosphere into liveliness, sort of like GLaDOS from Portal 2. Throughout the song there are orchestral samples that flourish the background of the drops, which there aren't really any, because it more so progresses between segments that aren't really energetic, and that sort of bugs me slightly, but not too much. A lot of unison voice separation is also highly utilized to further contribute to the horror environment, filled with bass patches that sound like corrupt violin strings. Alex is trying to make you piss your pants when you feel a hair on your leg. The growly voice processing further gives into the creativity of the intent of this song. Then around 2 minutes and 17 seconds in, we hear a grimier version of the main drop, and then a high-pitched segment and sound, someone cutting some humans up there. Around 3 minutes is my favorite part though, because that's when the bass stabs really take up the mix. A bit saddened it wasn't this consistent. I mean, I would have enjoyed if the earlier drops had this amount of spectrum filling, because they felt a bit empty. I do understand that this song is a progressive song. Wow! Fuck off, Flow. Overall, Slimewar does take inspiration from Slasher, a spooky track that stands out from the rest of the Void DLC. This song could be really representative of the Void. Back in June 2019, there was an earlier demo version of this song in which the drop sounded a bit more different than the final version, the demo being a little more diverse in pitch movement than the song. However, we've dreamed of this moment of hearing Dreamer right. the intro starts off with some chord one-shots that have a nice synth design, but I will have to admit that the introductory drum beat that follows is sort of hollow and empty. The snare sounds a bit too simple, and even so, the second beat of each bar is just the snare having its solo moment. I don't really favor this, but the melody afterwards makes up for it momentarily. The lead design is cute and cuddly to hear too, like I'm about to listen to some bunny pop drop in a bit. We seem to dwell ourselves into a trap segment with a trap snare. Actually, it is not really a snare. If you listen carefully, the lead is composed of two instruments, a voice sample with a reverb tail and then a dry, short sustaining vocal sample, which is actually the snare in this case. A siren with a 16th note synth pop sound fades in, which could be similar to that synth from Narcos from Outkast. The build-up at this point does sound lackluster, especially toward the end before the drop hits. I could have included a 16th note riser with maybe a reverse impact. But the bass drop does not disappoint, as this razor-sharp bass patch tramples the mix with the 8th note bass staff releasing wide in the stereo field. B section mostly in focusing some growls, similar to Snake. The fills such as the super saw melody, and it a nice switch up to the razor blade, as I may call it. Then afterwards, the C section is a vocal 8th note vocal note that seems to be just a tad bit short in its sustained length. Could have been lengthened with more release, and I do favor these low-end bass chops that help keep the momentum going. I would have appreciated if the initial razor blade drop would continue one last time before the first interlude hit, with some possible variation in note speed, maybe a third time toward the end of the song. But how can you forget that vocal long fill that is gnarly as fuck? I really like, if true, the infected mushroom influence that seems to take place here. The interlude repeats the same lead melody intro with some drum variation. The second drop though, there is a surprise bar of some vocal chopping, which could have been cut from the first drop, which in my opinion not the best place to put, and pasted toward the end as its own section, lasting a little longer. Around 3 minutes in though, we hear a kick-ass arcade machine sounding section with a triplet rhythm, which I could argue it could have its own section. In fact, it would be wiser at this point to have made those two previously mentioned sections, the vocal surprise bar and triplet arcade machine section, be their own drops and separate songs. These two ideas were a bit too inclusive and dreamer, but I would say this track is a lot of bass patch variety as usual. A bit disappointed because the razor blade section only appears once. I saw some potential in that, and I really love that infected mushroom influenced vocal. A lot of griminess here, sort of like in Snake. Big ups here. Being a completely new track with nothing teasing it before, Reach is really a standout track, not in terms of sound design, which is still existent in this song, but in the idea of a more down-tempo song. Starting off the track with some mid-riverby synths, you will start to hear a persisting theme in the song, with the silent part that frequently plays in the last two beats of a bar, to be exact. The main drop pretty much starts early, with some real bunny drums, and sounds too, and main emphasis being a horn-sounding synth and a higher octave synth, each seeming to have a fill to sweep down the frequencies, as if it has wow vowel being pronounced over time, which is a nice touch. And pretty much this section repeats for a bit with these bubbly sounds that take a bit of space of the silent parts. I would also have to say that it's actually a clever idea on the creative part. Silence can play a huge part in dance music, and this song has proved so. The B section does close up that brief moments of silence and showcases more high-pitched vocal sounds such as and the atmosphere is filled nicely. I already feel this remembrance of the Veebs album from 2016, when there were several ambient tracks that made the album stand out a bit from Savant's discography. The interlude beat then consists of this 16th note synth with more bubbly sounds, kick and clap thumping to the beat. This part seemed a bit empty, maybe a background pad such as an orchestral root note. Still though, we then reach this second follow-up trappy interlude, which seems to be a breakdown of the atmospheric energy that emitted previously, and pretty much the main drop repeats following with the 16th note chord section repeating afterwards, but part of the section becomes wit briefly before going back to the regular mixdown. Neat twist there, maybe a bit more reverb, but still, overall, Reach is such a creative track that brings back those Veebs vibes. And it's also a calm ambient song to listen to. first teased back in the second Instagram video teaser of Void DLC back in November, Barakaz at first glance seemed like a minor key melodic house track with a weird name. Barakaz seems like a Spanish proper name for an island out near Madagascar. Starting off, we have a clap and snare on every beat, constructing the introductory beat that also has an orchestral/organ solo beginning to develop over time, and these hard-hitting growls, and again, these samples already existing within the Monster VIP. And then this sound further tops the cake for an awesome intro, later kicking in with the kick, and the drop is really mainly a choir layered with some more bass going for an 8th note rhythm, the harmony having 3 chords that construct some evil sounding atmosphere, but with a groove, with these fills help keep the drop of some call and response part as well as these dun 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 parts keeping together. I really like bopping to this. It has grown more on me after listening to this a few more times. My slight complaint though, is that it could use a lead, or a harpsichord lead that is similar to the electro drop of the 2015 Slasher single. That could really top it, but this section is by the catchiest ones in the Void DLC. Then it immediately drops into a halftime dubstep drop, and I love this part of how the growls takes up the spectrum nicely, sound real saturated, and part of it mimics one of the riffs previously played in the song. The second build-up is pretty much the same as the intro build-up, but with kicks already jumping in the mix. The second drop is the same with no changes, and I cannot complain either. It really has that same vibe from If God Knew and Outcast. Then we get to the bridge section with the 16th note organ arp and harpsichord chords. The arp could be louder and a bit wider, but this screams classic Savant, let alone Barakaz. Around 2.5 minutes in, we pretty much hear an outro, a bit long to me, and the arrangement of the song also having room for improvement. The dubstep drop could have been extended with some note changes in the second half, with an extra build-up before it, thereby separating the melodic first drop, and the outro would not have to be so long. Still, this track recalls those retro Savant days, not really complextro, but it has almost that same execution and anvil from Outkast, which this song embraces the classical style of music, as Alex always done. One of my favorite tunes to sing to in Void DLC. Being first teased as an Instagram and Twitter video back in October 2019, mostly the build-up and part of the drop was shown. The melody was barely even heard, but here we are with Arc, a mostly melodic piece, with the glitch hop drop. With a soft orchestral impact, which I would have wanted to sound louder, along with the down-sweeping chiptune sample, some 16th notes of a quiet synth fades in and a cyberpunk-style arp appear, along with some piano chords. All of these create an intro that sounds motivational, making you want to stand up for something nearly impossible, or at least some shit like that. And one thing I find a bit strange is that the intro fades out quickly and it sort of builds itself back up again, going from bit crushed to normal, with the pianos and the lead synth humming the main melody. I would have preferred if this sweep out and in again did not happen and the lead synth fading into the intro, with the noise sweep joining and helping create the atmosphere. I just find this move done by Alex to throw me off and not engage me well enough with the flow of the track. You then have Lil Hun yelling, "Let's go," with the new chant every second beat and brass chop on every beat, both of which shift up in pitch over time, as well as the Lil Jon vocal and an arp. You can also hear a 16th note bass fading in, contributing to the intensity of what the drop is, with the drum roll before it. It switches to a future bass style halftime section with a beautiful lead and lead melody with a reverb that fills up the room, and also a brass chop that also chimes in with the beat, the hi-hats also tuning into the mix. This section then repeats itself a second time after a piano fade, in which I do wish it was different. I would have preferred some chord changes and some small changes within the lead melody, or just switch up the lead design. Hearing the same thing sort of ruins the hype. The section is so good, but simple repetition does not work for me. Also, that surprise bar of let's go. Some would argue it to be a nuisance. I actually approve it. Sure, it messes up the structure of the song, but I will not go against it. After the second Lil Jon build-up, a double-time Murabass drop segment occurs which really spices up Arc. I mean, holy shit, I do have to say that the cymbals also further give it the metal tempo feel. Then it jumps to half-time glitch hop drop, and my god, that patch is nasty, bro. Going real wide in the mix, maybe a bit too much, but I ravenously dig it. and that melodic fill in between the halftime segment still keeps the harmony in some form during the heavy bass segments. Not to mention that there is also a more bass fill in between the future bass segment, so if you think about it, there is some contrasting balance that has been noticed. Then a couple of variants of the double time drop follow afterwards, which to be fair, there is a lack of sub bass which could have been fixed here. Then it cuts to a simpler version of the Lil Jon build-up, with that ending the piece, which is a fascinating sound that I favor. However, I would have loved a continuation of the halftime glitch hop drop, maybe adding a B section that is normal time. The last build-up just seems a bit too sudden. Overall, this song's a melodic masterpiece that has some glitch hop sound design in there. Another favorite tune, the Hum to In the Void DLC. I can already recognize this demo is similar to the live demo teased back in an Instagram video on July 2019. Hardly any changes between the original song and this song. There was also a clip back in June 30th of 2019 that showed another part of this demo. The recognizable flute melody immediately starts with some soft electronic chords fading in and sub-bass appearing a few seconds later. The flute melody then doubles itself and the new copy is more so panned to the left, creating a stereo essence to the flute. A twinkly xylophone occasionally drops in and I think it's sort of innocent sounding. It really makes me want to rewind the intro already. Also, this cymbal, along with the kick and snare, really creates a tribal drum style that goes on for the rest of the intro build-up. You can also hear a whistling sample that also goes along with the melody. Then a kazoo-sounding synth sings the riff with the flute dropping and now and then, helping to create this harmony. And this sub-bass included too. It creates a wonderful version of the intro that is more energetic, but still a happy sort of segment. Then in the second half, the flute joins in quietly with this distorted bass as well. The drop, though, is of course interesting to hear, which mainly is just the distorted bass taking over, and yeah, it is not the best sound in the world, perhaps bad, but this is a demo, and if you listen closely, it has this voice trait that is slightly distinguishable, so it is interesting to hear anyways. The flute joins in a bit, but then we get to a chilling acoustic section. This could have been in the final version because oh bro, it has such magnificent potential for the interlude. It maybe can serve as an acoustic version for Soulgate. Then the segment that has these reggaeton drums and synth and xylophone stabs. Not a whole lot going on here. From here, you could really hear a song structure similar to the final version, the flute build-up with the snares and drop being the same between the two versions, but the demo having the drums be differently designed. Then from here, the intro melody from the final version can be heard, with a few of the violin string chords being slightly different, and then we hear the flute build-up having a drum variation around 4 minutes in, where you hear some snares and claps having this rushed rhythm, which I find to be a bit annoying, so I'm glad in the final version Alex went more with arranging the snares in the build-up to be on every beat only. Same appreciation goes for the drop. In this demo, the claps pretty much suffer the same sort of rhythm from the flute build-up, but in the original song, we hear the kicks being more put into emphasis and hardly any claps there at all. The demo version's last drop is still groovy though. The last part with pretty much the sub-bass and the kick was unnecessary and could have been cut out. Overall, the demo version's first drop with the distorted bass is, honestly, not really pleasing to hear, and with being a demo, the bar is set low. However, this section could have been cut out also. The melodic build-up still sounds unique compared to the final version, having its own kazoo-sounding lead and orchestral chops. And I know I said in the Void review last year that Soulgate has been underwhelming to me, but both versions still sound nice to listen to. After first listening to this demo for the first 30 seconds, I was perhaps surprised by the faster note, the piano instrument having more emphasis compared to the final version where there were a variety of instruments such as the horn, xylophone, guitar. Starting out we have some piano chords with a soft noise impact. An introductory beat with a kick and clap along with a finger snap. During this first loop, there isn't really much going on except a slap bass, a low octave note and then two higher octave notes that mimic a triplety rhythm. The higher pitched slap bass notes also have their own reverb tail, which actually makes up for the slight emptiness so far. The kick does sound a bit weak, but with the bar set low for demos in this album, it sounds okay to me. What also helps here is the pad sweeping in and out of the mix occasionally. Lastly, the ending fills of each bar so actually represent the all I want. Vocal melody. It seems apparent and shows that the vocal processes might have originated from that same riff. The second loop a little bit later on is just a piano solo with just the claps and finger snaps. The piano chords to fill up the space a bit, but I will have to say that this loop could have used a bit of tampered, so maybe a long sustaining slap bass with low mid EQ priorities could be added. The piano melody is touching though and sort of helps bridge together the parts before and after it. These two loops pretty much repeat a few times until around 2 minutes and 45 seconds in, when there is a silent section of the same background pad and the claps and finger snaps. I feel though, that part is nice as it creates a momentum break, maybe a bit empty. 1 or 2 synths could have been included, and the pad by itself also ends the track. Nothing really new. The All I Want demo was sort of a momentum breaker from the album's energy prior to it. This is by far another one of my few favorite songs from Void DLC to hum along to. Being a melodic electro track and never having been teased before, well, almost would be a favorite, as I do unfortunately have a pet peeve with how the first, a very long sustained pad introduces the gate, and is followed up with a violin solo with some lower end strings as well. Then some what sound to be space drums faded with a wide stereo field, and a lead pad that is sort of sounding like a flute joins in. However, it seems so brief to me, it could have gone longer, and it also sounds a bit too harsh on the ears for a brief moment. Could have used some equalizing on the lower end, or even just leveled down in volume. Then there is this progressive 16th note synth tharp section which is already beautiful after just listening to its first 20 seconds. In fact, this part is definitely a standout section from the Void DLC, bringing back those trance vibes like 1997 from Invasion. You could also hear a second, maybe even also a third ARP synth going along with these beautiful sounding chords and a trancey lead too. But the bass section can also be heard quietly fading in. However, this is where my main complaint for the gate comes in. The first 3 minutes, almost half of the song, take up the progressive part of the song, and the 3-minute mark is when the electro drop hits. It could have been just a minute and a half, and I would guarantee that this track's progression would be a bit better in terms of just slightly rushing the flow and getting to hear this beautiful lead melody earlier. As for the drop, I do notice that there is not really any synth that establishes any chords. However, the hard-hitting bass and saturated lead synth pretty much fills up the drop enough to make it sound energetic. Even these cute 2-beat voice fills sound really fun to listen to occasionally, as if the drop's melody wasn't enough. Then the B section of the drop is a similar sounding lead but not really the same, that sings a bit more of a complex melody. During this part, you can also hear the previous lead being layered quietly under it, sounding to have a low-pass filter, with the same bass synth having its moment here and some cowbell that can also be heard in the distance, further adding to the percussion. And I should note that, even the bass sounds lively, as periodically it pitch bends when it changes notes, which is a plus to me. I do feel as though the B section could have used some chord synth being layered in too, even if just leveled down than the rest of the instruments. Then pretty much the part of the introductory ARP section acts as the interlude. No real changes here except a root note pad with a vibrato hanging at the end of each note. I guess it sort of gives some more excitement. But I also feel that it could use some vocals, especially during the ARP sections, that could perhaps sing the A section melody. Maybe also another vocal line for the B section melody. There could be more potential here, but already the gate is a bop. The over-lengthy ARP section for almost the first half of the track does not bother me, but I sort of grow impatient wanting to hear the energetic drop. So overall, it could have been a melodic electro banger if the first half length was adjusted. Acting out as the outro track for Void DLC, we seem to have a Chillout version of Zealot, and I do want to say that while I do enjoy the Zealot melody and instruments, I do kind of wish there was an alternate version for a song that does not have a VIP or alternate version in the album already, such as Oasis, or perhaps the demo version of Cheesy for example, as there has been an Instagram video teaser of the song that sounds a bit different from the final version. Still, this is still a beautiful version of Zealot that do deserve to be heard by the masses. Immediately we hear a UFO type of sound as a reverse impact, followed by the well-known flute loop accompanied by a different sounding piano, or at least one that has a longer decay. The flute has its own reverb, contributing to the wholesomeness of the track. As for the chord melody, there are also some new chords that sound enriching as fuck, such as... And at times you can also hear a hissing voice sample that makes you say, ooh, fancy. A root notepad can also slightly be heard later on. Pretty much all of the flute's melodies heard in the original version play out with the same piano laying out some chords. Ha ha ha, get it? Dead mouse joke. Which by the way sound cleverly thought out. There aren't really any drums in the Chillout mix, but it is a Chillout mix after all. Still, there could have been some alternate rock-style drums with reverb during the section in there or two. But this mix sounds fine as its own already. Up until 2.5 minutes in the piano and flute play their parts, until the flute starts with some wetness. Then a section follows after that has this xylophone with a nice transient, which I guess could even act as the kick for this section. Never really heard this though, so I'll give him that. Then an outro xylophone solo. Who knows if it's a xylophone, so please give me a break here. I can't really describe it. Anyways, it pretty much sings the lead and chord melodies all together. It sounds different, however, a bit adjusted to sound more natural it seems. With expanding reverb, a chord yells its final moment before it drifts into pure witness and fading out, beautifully concluding the Void DLC. This song was properly chosen to be an outro, and I could not agree more on this version deserving to be its own separate song. Definitely worth listening to. Sure, the Zealot melody does seem a bit washed out at this point, but we should appreciate this because the melody and the choice of a flute sound good together, and I cannot blame him for wanting to milk these elements to different versions. So the Void DLC, or an extension album to the Void album released on April 2020, is definitely a very interesting one, and by that I mean that there are a few new original songs that Alex decided to combine with VIPs and demo versions of songs from Void. It is as if this was a smaller Outcast too, but rather than based on past tracks from the Savant discography, Void is obviously the main focus here. And I did find a review somewhere on the internet that did spark an interesting perspective, which the person did not sound to be amused by the album by much. It is valuable to consider the possibility of pushing aside the VIPs and demos of songs from Void, and just releasing an EP with the new songs from Void DLC instead of the album is currently, which I agree to some extent. However, I do want to emphasize how Alex might not intend for Void DLC to be separated as previously mentioned. I do think that Alex intended the Void DLC to be an extension to Void, which the main goal here was to release different versions of songs from Void and unheard of songs that would have made it onto Void or sound design as similar to the rest of the original songs from the 2020 album. With that said, there really must be a lower bar of standards than a regular Savant album, where in Void, all songs are original and have these expectations of mixing and mastering. As for the Void DLC, some songs did feel empty in some sections, such as I'm Hot, which I do have to say that its arrangement could have been readjusted in some sections, like around the 5-minute mark, could have been taken out. Same sort of criticism goes for the Leviathan demo. Both these demos could also have been shortened, especially in the Leviathan demo, with already a lot of drop ideas in there. The main screech drop still repeats itself, explaining the surprisingly long song length. The IDGAF VIP was a bit underwhelming because of the lack of drop variation. The melody really kicks ass and was most likely needed to be in the original version. Also, after listening to the Batman demo and VIP, I do also say that both of these sound similar and I can't really differentiate between them. There are some cool ideas in there, especially the metal band influence in the VIP, but I've heard a section or two that were both in the VIP and demo. The VIP could have expanded the metal band idea throughout the whole song instead of just half. However, as for variety, Alex really shows off some synthwave in the Monolith demo, reggaeton in the Monolith VIP, happy hardcore in the Zealot remix, classic Savant glitch hop in Immortal, future bass in Arc, trance in the Gate, complex throw in the Monster and Reaper VIPs, Veeb style type of ambient music in Reach, while the rest of some of the usual Savant dubstep and musical instrumentation. Slimewar in the Void had something new, with the song embodied horror cinema style of music, almost as if it could have been in the Slasher album. Dreamer, though, I do sort of wish there was more drop time. I feel like there was too much time dedicated to the intro and interludes, but I really do love that 16th note future bass synth. Barakaz really brought back those if God knew vibes. The Gate was something memorable to listen to, but again, the first half of the song ran too long with the introductory sections, especially the art sections. Mixing and mastering of Void DLC, it still holds up like in the original Void album. However, there are some basses that were too centered and could have been a bit wider, and on the arrangement side of the album, Leviathan demo and Immortal demo could have used a lot of treatment. Both Bad Man alternate versions could have also used some help. But the original songs are what really do the job well in terms of audience engagement. But I do say that the Void DLC is something more for the hardcore Savant fans and not really a fitting one for electronic dance music listeners. And it is sort of shame now that I think of it, if Alex wanted to put out a more EDM fan-friendly album, the idea of separating the original songs from the VIPs and demos could have been useful. However, at the end of the day, we can listen to any song on the internet individually, and most of us seem to really enjoy the Void DLC. So thank you, Alexander, for treating us with some more dank dubstep, classical melodies, melodic house stuff, chiptune music, and many more. And so thank you, Savant fans, for sticking with me this far, as I intend to further review future Savant albums. The Insert Coin documentary OST also might have an analysis and review soon. But for now, this is enough of a review. Anyways, see you on another video on the Savant 2.0 channel. Until next time, cultists, farewell.
Complex troll mother.
Hi, I'm INFJ. Thanks for watching this video from Savant 2.0. If you want to see more content from him, you can click here, or you can click right here. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.